Okay, it's Mike once again, Older Religion Dystopia, ORD3, and ORD3, the Fortean Emirate. The two channels. The latter one is banned right now from posting live interviews and videos, so uploading videos, so please let people know about it and tell them to come over to this channel, ORD3. I imagine there'll be an ORD4, an ORD5, and so on, etc. I'm going to get back into the reading of Origins of the Gods by Andrew Collins and Gregory L. Little. I do believe it is some vital information, or insight at least, perspective when it comes to dealing with Bigfoot and the bigger picture of this creation. We are now I guess it'd be chapter 3. Is that how you can? Because I know we broke it down in 2 parts. Let's see something for a second here. Part 1. So it'd be part 1.1. I'm going to make it part 1A. So B and C. So we're now at part 1C. Carl Jung, Tricksters, and John Keel. And hopefully you get something out of it. I know I get something out of it. I think it's important to not just always stare at videos. We have to actually find some books that are worth reading. I think another one that might be worth getting. Let's see, where did he say that in the beginning? Something about the web. People of the web sounds like that would be a good one to get from Mr. Little. He also brought up another book that I have to look it back on and see. When he's clearing out his books, he kept one in particular. I think it's Jim Brandon's 1983 book, The Rebirth of Pan. That's something worth looking to. Maybe that'll be the next book I get. All these names of these books are really good books, but they're kind of deceiving the way they are titled. So I don't know, this bit of a little trickster in all of us, right? Anyways, here we go. I became aware of the Trickster during the late 1970s when I was studying the UFO speculations of Carl Jung. Jung's 1959 book, Flying Saucers, has been one of the most misunderstood UFO-related books of all time. His concept of archetypical manifestations in the sky appearing at the same time as the Cold War synchronicity served as the underlying basis of his idea on UFOs. Most people have read Jung's UFO works generally conclude that Jung believed that the phenomenon was psychological in nature. For example, Ron's stories, Encyclopedia of Extraterrestrial Encounters, that's another one to get as well, in which I wrote several sections, but not the entry on Jung, summarized Jung's ideas about UFOs by inaccurately stating that, quote, they are purely mental and have no existence outside of the mind of the observer. Jung regarded the UFO phenomena as a visionary rumor and as a psychological projection of man's hopes and fears in an uncertain world, end quote. That's partly accurate, but it is clear Jung believed that something very real was behind the phenomena. It was not all in the mind of the observer, but that's what most people inaccurately believe about Jung's conclusions. It is the interpretation of what was observed that comes from the mind of the witness, and the quote something end quote that we observed interacts with the mind of the witness. Jung also asserted that what was often interpreted as a UFO by witnesses was usually something deceptive. It was trickster-like. Jung's writings cast a large net over the concept of the trickster, citing it as a mythological creature, an archetypical symbol found in virtually all cultures. The trickster is a personification of the disruptive forces of nature, a mechanism to explain chaos. It usually appears in an animal-like or human-like form. It was an archetypical figure that adapted its physical appearance to the beliefs, expectations, and mythology of different cultures in specific times and specific places throughout history. So it's probably important to define what Jung meant by the term archetype. Few people are aware that Jung's beliefs about archetypes evolved and changed over the course of his lifetime. Archetypes are commonly thought of as symbols that are consistently found in all cultures. For example, to Jung, apparitions of the Virgin Mary, fairies, disc-shaped objects, circular patterns, and even angels and demons are included in the vast range of archetypical symbols. They all have an underlying symbolic meaning. Symbols that are found again and again through time and across cultures he called archetypes. The word archetype essentially means the original model after which others are copies. Archetypes typically come in polar opposites: male, female, wise, man, fool, light, dark, God, Satan, angel, demon, trickster, helper. Only one archetype, the mandala, a circular or disc-like image, represented wholeness, balance, and harmony. This is why Jung saw the emergence of the flying saucer era in the late 1940s as a mechanism for the masses to look for alien intervention to assist humanity at a time when nuclear obliteration was a very real possibility. The circular objects were reported as UFOs, Mandelas. The Mandela effect, Mandelas. Isn't that interesting? How do they twist that in the past decade? Were interpreted as a type of divine intervention, salvation from possible destruction. In essence, Jung theorized that something real was seen in the skies and that our psychological hopes for salvation were mentally projected on the round disc-like objects. That is, we gave the objects the meaning we wanted and needed. Jung repeatedly stated, something is seen, one doesn't know what. In essence, when we don't know what the something is, we attribute a meaning to it based on our own beliefs and our unconscious needs. But it's important to keep in mind that with the exception of the Mandela, Jung related that archetypes exist in opposites. In essence, the array of archetypes categorized as opposites are splinters. from the original whole. In 1984, I theorized that all the archetypes were created through the initial act of creation itself, and that the oneness of all things was splintered apart into opposites. However, Jung's speculation about archetypes were not confined to mental images and symbols. To Jung, the archetypes were real. Jung eventually came to believe that archetypes were independent, autonomous entities with a will of their own, probably existent for all time. In effect, they are a symbolic representation that emerges to accomplish a purpose. However, it's important to understand that there is a decidedly non-physical aspect to them. Specifically, there is a reality of archetypes that exist apart from the mind of man. When archetypes are encountered, they cannot be ignored as they inundate the conscious mind and are experienced by the witness. The witness of the archetypical manifestation place a meaning or interpretation of what they see, and the process is called projection in psychology. That is, we mentally project a meaning onto things we observe. As a simple example, people have always seen anomalous, hard to identify lights in the sky. Some will immediately interpret them as alien craft, and others will assume they are something else. The interpretation or meaning attributed to the unidentified light is what is projected from the mind of the observer onto the object. It is our beliefs and preconceptions that give a meaning to the unknown. Today, many people attribute the technological meaning of such visible anomalies, but in the ancient past, they interpreted these events in a far different way. To Jung, archetypes always have a spiritual nature. However, Jung cryptically asserted that archetypes could sometimes appear in physical, objective reality. He wrote, quote, "The archetype is such as a psychoid factor." So let's try this. The archetype as such is a psychoid factor that belongs, as it were, to the invisible, ultraviolet end of the psychic spectrum. That's actually, and that's the end of that quote. That's actually an amazing assertion few people have understood, and the term psychoid explains what Jung meant. Psychoid is a Jungian term that means a process that is able to bridge the gap between the psychological reality and objective reality. Well, I'll read that again. Psychoid is a Jungian term that means a process that is able to bridge the gap between psychological reality and objective reality. Archetypes, as pure nature, are pure energy remaining primarily invisible, but occasionally manifest themselves. That is, they occasionally become a physical reality in an objective sense. One of Jung's closest friends and associates, Maria Louise von Franz, often mentioned that Jung believed in a non-physical reality of the archetypes. By invoking the phrase ultraviolet end of the psychic spectrum, Jung was relating to the psychoid nature of of archetypes, was similar to and related to the electromagnetic energy spectrum. And here's an example here which you will not see, but it's the electromagnetic spectrum, the visible spectrum, the schematic of the electromagnetic energy spectrum. Visible light is in the center of the schematic, with infrared on the lower end left side and the ultraviolet on the higher end right side. Cell phones and Wi-Fi frequencies are located between TV and radar frequencies. If I'm not mistaken, that would be on the low end, right? Did I get that right? I don't know if I got that right. It says here that it's like at the 100 M, whereas radioactive elements are at 0.0001 nm. So let's see if I can get this right. Where's the ultraviolet? I'm trying to understand this schematic. You can't see it. I guess the more denser would be the building, wouldn't it? Wave size large, wave size small, visible light. Visible light would be like your light bulb. So smaller size would be like X-rays, sun, radioactive elements. Larger size would be TV remotes, cell phones, FM, TV, radar, Wi-Fi, that kind of thing. Solid or physical matter is also a vibrating energy that can be perceived through our senses. As Einstein stated, energy and mass are simply different manifestations of the same fundamental thing, something that's difficult to grasp. The simplest definition of electromagnetic energy is that it is a form of energy reflected from and emitted from objects. Once again, the simplest definition of electromagnetic energy is that it is a form of energy reflected from or emitted from objects. The energy is composed of electrical and magnetic waves that travel through space. The electromagnetic energy spectrum ranges from very low frequency radio waves on one end to gamma rays and cosmic rays on the highest frequency end. Visible light is a narrow band in the middle range of the spectrum, with infrared light and ultraviolet light on the two edges of the visible light. I get it. So, okay, I get it. So infrared and ultraviolet light are that very narrow band of visible light that we have, that we can actually see what we can actually see with our own naked physical eyes. The one end is the infrared, and the other end is ultraviolet light, and that's what we can see. I wonder what's going on with that banging. It's pretty windy out. I wonder why she's doing it. What Jung was asserted is that under some circumstances, the archetypes, did I miss them? The visible light composes less than 5% of the spectrum. So the visible light that we have is less than 5% of the spectrum of electromagnetic energy. What Jung was asserting is that under some circumstances, the archetypes can move from the invisible ends of the electromagnetic energy spectrum to the visible light frequencies, where they appear to manifest in physical reality. This is a process that was referred to as transmutation or transmogrification. transmogrification. Not there's no N in it. Mogrification in occult literature. It is truly an incredible assertion. This is a very important section. I have to remember this section if I can. But it just starts, I think it just starts off from the beginning, right? Yeah. Section 3 of this book is extremely important. You want to understand what Bigfoot research. If you don't comprehend this stuff, I think it will get you. If we don't comprehend this stuff, I think it will get us all in a bit of trouble. And if we do comprehend it, then it will save us from a lot of manipulation and deception, whether deliberate or not, from others. The Trickster. Young was especially keen on Native American tales of the trickster and the connection to the paranormal. He related that all mythological figures correspond to inner psychic experiences. It is not surprising to find certain phenomena in the field of parapsychology which remind us of the trickster. End quote. According to Jung, the trickster played malicious tricks on humans, had the ability to change shapes, and often took the form of animals. Most importantly, Jung asserted that interactions with the trickster played a central role in the Am I recording this? I want to make sure I'm recording this. I'm trying to plug some of this stuff in there. I know that I don't do things the best way to promote things, but it's only so much time a man has in a day, in a week. So he does the best he can to get stuff done. You know what I mean? Whether it's very effective as far as promoting quote unquote my YouTube channels, that's a whole nother thing. So anyways. Where am I at this? Okay, look at this tricksters. Most importantly, Jung asserted that the interactions with the trickster played a central role in all paranormal phenomena, interacting purposely with the trickster also was, according to Jung, the primary activity underlying the practice of shamanism. And so once again, interacting purposely with the trickster or spirits, right, also was, according to Jung, the primary activity underlying the practice of shamanism. To Native Americans, the trickster was a spiritual entity that could impart deep knowledge or create chaos. Shamans had to carefully navigate between two distinctive different possible outcomes when dealing with tricksters. In a psychological sense, Jung believed that the trickster was a way for humans to explain the chaos observed in the natural world, as well as serving a compensatory mechanism by which we could excuse ourselves after making blunders or errors in judgment. That was his explanation of the psychological function of the trickster, but it is very clear that to Jung, the archetypical trickster was very real. Tricksters as animals, fairies, and little people. The tricksters, and you can put Bigfoot in this, by the way. The tricksters have been seen in many guises throughout the history, including the Muslim jinn, fairies, gnomes, and European lore, poltergeist, and little people in the Native American myths, and a variety of clever shape-shifting animals. Native Americans viewed the trickster in a multiple of animal forms: coyote, wolves, ravens, spiders, and among others. One aspect that is important to understand is that not all such animals were tricksters. Sometimes a coyote or spider was just that, a coyote or spider. The trickster took whatever form was most appropriate in the situation. The form always related to the cultural expectations and beliefs of its witness. Even the so-called little people, a common theme mentioned in a wide range of Native American mythology, were often seen as tricksters, albeit very powerful forms of the spiritual manifestation. The trickster is a temporary entity that can create fear, distrust, and confusion. In belief, the trickster seems to be one thing, but it is actually another. It seems to relate truth, but it often leads to deceit. It makes you think you are right when you are actually wrong. It is a creature of chaos and instigates entropy, the breakdown of order. However, as it fulfills the role, it also facilitates creation and can lead to a deeper understanding of life's many mysteries. If you can move beyond the deceptions of the trickster, you can come to see reality more clearly and gain power from the interaction. Encountering a trickster is always a test. The Native American conceptualization of the trickster is multifaceted and complex. Trickster stories were often told to children to explain many things, and virtually all of the stories boil down to tales about morality, right and wrong. But it is clear that on a deeper level, the trickster can be seen as a way to truth and understanding. It is important to keep in mind that the trickster is an actual being in Native American mythology, manifesting itself physically, if only for brief periods. As I wrote in People of the Web, quote, "It was very real." The trickster was not only a powerful figure from the spirit world who emerged to delude and toy with man, but he served as a test to initiates. To serve as a test that initiates had to pass before they could gain access to higher spiritual forms. Long ago, the ancient shaman realized that the trickster emerges in the real world along with other spirits, whether they wanted them to or not. But they also found that by performing certain ritualistic behavior at prescribed times in prescribed places, they could enlist the benign aid of the trickster and commune with deeper forces of nature. Ancient societies chose to harmonize themselves with those forces. John Keel and the trickster element. In the late 1960s, the famed ufologist and paranormalist John Keel was deeply involved in the investigation of numerous bizarre accounts coming from Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Just about everyone is aware of the Mothman prophecies. Keel's book about the events that ended with the tragic collapse of the Silver Bridge on December 15, 1967, and the deaths of more than 46 people. Keel and many others saw strange lights in the sky during this 13-month-long affair, but the most impressive accounts were from literally a few hundred people who lived in the immediate area around Point Pleasant. They told of seeing a bizarre 7-foot-tall winged being with glowing red eyes that eventually became known as Mothman because its wings were featherless. Keel came to believe that it was a trickster element at work. And then, of course, over that Point Pleasant, West Virginia, you got this crazy-looking statue of Mothman. It's a hell of a thing to have in your town. It's a hell of a thing to associate your town with, isn't it? And letters to UFO researcher Brent Rains, Keel related that nothing stemming from the trickster could be trusted and that, quote, it's a very mischievous force, end quote. Keel eventually explained such events as originating from an intelligence he called, quote, ultra-terrestrial, end quote, meaning it came from some other part of our normal spectrum of senses and reality. I like that word, ultra-terrestrial. That makes more sense than what is it? Well, that sounds ultra-terrestrial. Keel repeatedly mentioned the electromagnetic energy spectrum as their source. In his 1975 book, The Eighth Tower, Keel summarized the idea by asserting that the ultra-terrestrials were the ultimate source of power underlying UFOs, paranormal events, and religious and occult phenomena. They can communicate to us mentally through electromagnetic waves or appear in a physical, visible form by altering their vibrational frequency in the narrow band of visible light. We are, in Keel's view, biological antennas that exist within and physically move through an electromagnetic energy spectrum that produces a myriad of effects on us. In this perspective, we are like living radios tuned to pick up certain frequencies from the electromagnetic spectrum. The ultra-terrestrials are intelligent electromagnetic spectrum entities existing outside the visible light frequency that broadcast messages of all sorts. As biological antennas, humans pick up these messages. In addition, the intelligence existing within these spectrums is able to temporarily manifest itself into what appears to be a host of physical forms. That is, it can temporarily appear to be physical. In essence, Keel and Jung were saying the same thing. In later chapters, we'll revisit this idea, and certainly we will, because that's what this is all about. This is what all this gig is all about, what we're all experiencing. Yep, indeed, the trickster spirit. I strongly believe that's what we're dealing with.
You're going to try, go all the way. Otherwise, don't even start. If you're going to try, go all the way. This could mean losing girlfriends, wives, relatives, jobs, and maybe your mind.